All right, so good morning. We already went through some introductions, but Josh, my mentor, and Chris, my peer and advisor. And in my head, I had a lot of a touching little speech, but I'll cry. But I thank you both very much for your continued support throughout this year. So just quickly going through what this PACT presentation will look like, a little bit about who I am and how I got here, briefly going through our school information, the current reality of leadership in our school and for myself as an individual, a quick recap from the mid-year regarding the SIP. I really want to spend a bulk of my time in the core leadership practices to really highlight that learning and leading, and then where am I going? What are some next steps? And then focus question. So this is kind of just, if I were to pull up my resume, most of this would be on there. For a long time, I was a little bit ashamed of this because I was like, wow, I have been everywhere. Like, what story does this tell? And my mindset in my overall PRN journey and leadership has really shifted to now say, like, wow, like, look at all of this experience that I have and what has this done for me, not only professionally, but personally. One thing that I do really want to highlight that's not at all mapped out on here, other than PRN, because I ran out of space on the timeline, is that the Green School was the first place that I had a moment of like, oh my gosh, like this matters. Me as a Black woman in leadership, I had a student who was in 10th grade and they were presenting and she started to tear up just speaking about, you know, how much it meant to her as a Black girl to have somebody in leadership for the first time. And that was kind of like my aha moment. On this end, before high school, some of my big aha moments were like, I lived in Pawtucket, but I went to school in East Providence and I always had this like, why are we doing this? Parents, like, this is taking so much time. This is ridiculous. And they were just like, it's so much better there. Like, you have to go to school there. My brother repeated the first grade and I don't really remember much, but it caused a lot of tension. My brother also, so my junior year and senior year, I did end up going to Tolman in Pawtucket. I had some moments of like, what is happening? Like, I am so far ahead of my credits. I get to take gym class a bunch of times. This is great, but like, what is going on? And also at that time, my brother was now in his third year of the 9th grade without proper communication to the family. And it just, for his story, it's set him up directly to what we read about school to prison pipeline. And then I kind of run through my own journey with this polarity of, again, like, here's the reason I can't do all of these things. Look at all these setbacks. Look at the way that society is depicting me to be as a Black woman. I really struggled with my vision statement because I was like, I don't know what equity looks like. Like, was a quiet kid. I got C's. I just minded my business until good old Mr. Smith in the 7th grade, my first Black teacher, he didn't let me be quiet. And he just really instilled in me that I can do whatever it is I want to do, and I'm going to be amazing at whatever it is I choose to be. That's a little bit about me. So just some information about our school as a reminder, our mission statement, our school demographics coming from many different cities and towns across Rhode Island. And all of this information is just very important for context. As you can see, we are very diverse in our statistics across the board. We are an EL credentialed school, and this is part of the vision that EL has for their schools. And I really want to show this video of Rita Pearson, and she talks about championing every child. And as a school, we watch this video every year in PD. And this year, we also watched it throughout the year because this was a challenging year and staff morale was hard, and transitions for 9th grade were hard. And our seniors, I was joking earlier, they gave us a 2 out of 10 this year. So we really anchored ourselves in this video and in her words, and it really is a theme throughout my presentation. So I just wanted to spend some time and show a part of this video. You should be able to just click it and it should play right in the slide deck.
I have spent my entire life either at the schoolhouse, on the way to the schoolhouse, or talking about what happens in the schoolhouse. Both my parents were educators. My maternal grandparents were educators. And for the past 40 years, I've done the same thing. And so needless to say, over those years, I've had a chance to look at education reform from a lot of perspectives. Some of those reforms have been good, some of them have been not so good. And we know why kids drop out. We know why kids don't learn. It's either poverty, low attendance, negative peer influences. We know why. But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection, relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. For years, I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson, the kids should learn it, I should teach it, they should learn it, case closed. Well, I said to her, you know, kids don't learn from people they don't like. That's just a bunch of hooey. And I said to her, well, your year is gonna be long and arduous, dear. Needless to say, it was. Some people think that you can either have it in you to build a relationship or you don't. I think Stephen Covey had the right idea. He said you ought to just throw in a few simple things, like seeking first to understand as opposed to being understood. Simple things like apologize. You ever thought about that? Tell a kid you're sorry, they're in shock. I taught a lesson once on ratios. I'm not real good with math, but I was working on it. And I got back and looked at that teacher edition. I taught the whole lesson wrong. So I came back to class the next day and I said, look, guys, I need to apologize. I taught the whole lesson wrong. I'm so sorry. I said, that's okay, Ms. Pearson. You were so excited. We just let you go. I have had classes that were so low, so academically deficient that I cried. I wondered, how am I going to take this group in 9 months from where they are to where they need to be? And it was difficult. It was awfully hard. How do I raise the self-esteem of a child and his academic achievement at the same time? One year I came up with a bright idea. I told all my students, you were chosen to be in my class because I am the best teacher and you are the best students. They put us all together so we could show everybody else how to do it. One of the students said, really? I said, really? We have to show the other classes how to do it. So when we walk down the hall, people will notice us. So you can't make noise, you just have to sprint. And I gave them a saying to say, I am somebody. I was somebody when I came. I'll be a better somebody when I leave. I am powerful and I am strong. I deserve the education that I get here. I have things to do, people to impress, and places to go. And they said, yeah. You say it long enough, it starts to be a part of you. And so, I gave a quiz, 20 questions. Student missed 18. I put a +2 on this paper and a big smiley face. He said, Miss Pearson, Miss Pearson, can't get it. On the road. You got two routes, you didn't miss them all. That wants you to better. He said, you make.
Okay. So we use that as a base to say, everybody needs their Rita Pearson, every student needs their person. And we really grounded this and moved to move ourselves forward in like, where are we? What are our, I think you have to physically go to the next. Like this. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
What is our current reality? Where are we right now? And how are we going to move forward to learn our students and to meet their needs? So right here, you'll see the 6 core leadership practices. The top ones in color, those scores out of 4 were pulled from the Learning Community Survey provided by CLE. This was the one that was given at the end of the year. So with the exception of building the capacity to teach, which stayed the exact same, and building the capacity to lead, which did improve, all of the other scores did decrease a bit. However, what I would like to highlight is that the second time I gave this survey, 8 more people responded to the survey. So through a probing question from Chris, like, what did I do differently in my facilitation to increase individuals' interest and scores? Well, I had a structured time where I administered the survey, where that's not what I did the first time. And for individuals, for staff members who are not regularly part of PE due to their role in the building, it was still valuable for me to get their input. So I went, I sought them out, I sat with them for a little while, we talked about it, and then I sent the survey directly to them. In these boxes at the bottom, those are the ratings for my individual scores on these core leadership practices. The top half, you will see those are my scores at the beginning of the year, and the bottom half, you will see those are the scores that I have ended the year with. The ones in the pale green color, those are areas that I have identified as having the most growth over the course of the year, although I would like to highlight that there was growth across the board. But the areas in the gray are just notes for me and continued improvement. All right, so the continuous improvement plan. We did touch on this a bit in the springtime, so just mid-year. So just wanted to lift it up for a bit. So through our summer data dig, unfortunately, as a school, we had just done an equity audit. So none of this information was surprising. However, it was just reaffirming and things that we have already found. We had to choose an assessment. I used STAR, and we had to identify a subset of students. So I used grade 9, and within grade 9, I utilized students who identified as BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and just recognize that their proficiency in reading they weren't meeting benchmark, and they need twice as many students compared to their peers or white students needed some level of intervention. In order to make a plan, we did have to identify some root causes. These root causes came from, again, reviewing our equity audit, empathy interviews with teachers, as well as just ongoing conversations with my mentor. The one that I would really like to highlight is this last bullet point, lack of differentiated instruction, because as I got into the nitty-gritty of my SIP plan, we really rooted ourselves in 2 levels of differentiated instruction, academic and social emotional. So at first I was super intimidated by the continuous improvement cycles, because I was like, what if one cycle isn't good? What if I don't meet the cycle with success? Due to Chris and doing some processing, that was totally okay. And that's the reason why we do multiple cycles, so we can continue to adjust based on the data that we are finding. So the first cycle, I worked primarily with the grade 9 English teacher and a special educator, as well as my mentor. It was kind of through the lens of like math, like active, like management in the active classroom. Like, all right, listen, grade 9 is really loving high school life. Like, let's let's get them in some seats based on what we see for behavior. Turns out that they all love each other, doesn't matter where you put that, they're gonna still talk. So then we were like, okay, let's still go with some intentional seating. However, let's inform this with the data that we're seeing, so we can start to move ourselves towards some differentiated practices. Towards the end of cycle 2, that's where we were intentional about creating this wheel over here, which is also backed by PDSA, so Plan, Do, Study, Act. And by the time we were in our 3rd cycle, we were following this model, right? We're really looking at what data do we currently have, how are we using that data to inform our instruction, implementing the plans, looking at the teacher's unit plans. I was very intentional about prioritizing and protecting time to go in and do classroom observations and following up with the classroom teacher in debriefs. We also started to pull in some work samples from students, recognizing that data is only telling us a piece of the story. And then we would continuously do that. Every time we met twice a week. And the teacher was also progress monitoring, which you'll see in my core leadership practices, every 6 to 8 weeks, recognizing that beginning, middle, and end of year was just not enough to see student growth. We needed to have more information. So at the end of this, where did this leave us? So this was, I had to really embrace my Rita Pearson +2 moments, because I was like, what the heck? We spent all this time and like, what is happening? But one thing the teacher also did was the teacher started to involve the student in their progress monitoring data and really celebrating those, like, you might still be in the red, but guess what? You went up 12 points and we're going to celebrate that. And I had to put myself in the same mindset. We did close this equity gap. Now, did it meet our goal and is it where we would like to be? It's not, but there is a decrease in the equity gap. Now, is there still more work that we need to do with differentiated instruction? Yes, because we're seeing that we're not reaching our top students. We kind of put all our focus in our focal group. And so there's still more work to be done. And my wonder walking away from this is, what does it look like to start this work at the very beginning of the year, and where would that lead us now? First is like starting this as the year has already gone on. All right, we'll run through my core leadership practices. So the first core leadership practice, setting direction. What I have really taken away from this is that this is really about facilitation, and it's about holding the container for a space with various stakeholders that are identifying inequities. So as a team, we're able to identify goals. What is our mission and how do we want to get there? What is our vision? One way I did this was I, as the dean, facilitated weekly. Initially, we moved to bi-weekly, and as we ended the year, we're going to move back to weekly student of concerns meetings. We had various members from administration, leadership, and student services joining these meetings. And these meetings were kind of like a catch-all, just bringing everybody to the table so we are able to discuss what's happening in our building. We're a smaller school, so it's really nice to be able to do that. But the primary focus for this was really for our general education students. Special education, they have their department 504, you have your coordinator, and MTSS, we also have a coordinator for that as well. So this was like, hey, let's come together. What are we doing? Now, in coming together, I pulled the leadership norms, and as a team, we did go over the norms, and we did feel like we needed to add one. We added champion every child. We also, as a team, crafted what is the purpose of these meetings? Like, how are we going to be intentional, and how are we going to progress monitor, and how are we going to get things done? And we crafted our objective together. One thing I know walking out of this core leadership practice is that I am definitely a stronger facilitator, and I'm more confident. Ways that has come up throughout the year is the school year gets busy and the team started dropping off, and I was feeling through my lens like this is seemingly not important to people and this needs to be important to people. So in our next meeting, put it on our agenda to revisit our purpose, what is our intention, and pose the questions, what is the implications if we are not having these meetings? And the team responded very, very well. And for the most part, we haven't had anybody miss since then. And then things do happen, but there is an increased level of transparency and communication if people can't attend these meetings. And there is intentional follow-up by team members as well. One thing that I am wondering, walking away from this, or walking further into this core leadership practice, is how do we continue to cultivate a sense of accountability within our teams? And one way that I would like to start working on that is to utilize roles within the meetings to build accountability. So I found that I had the lid on the container too much. I was the facilitator, the timekeeper, the note taker. I was doing everything. And through feedback began to wonder, okay, what does it look like to open it up? Who wants to do time? Who wants to take notes? And if people are feeling a little bit more invested that way, then they'll feel more connected to the work we're doing. Monitoring progress was really about collecting, organizing, and analyzing data, and then at a consistent rate. And then once we have that data, really looking at it and saying, okay, what is this data trying to tell me? What is the story here? And then once we have the story, how am I now taking that story and making it public? Because I can also recognize that this is only through my lens, and leadership is very much a shared process. So thinking back to my SIP and the progress, I'm not going to open this link, but this is some of the various progress monitoring, working with the grade 9 ELA teacher. And every time she would test, I would go in, I would update this document, I would take a look at it. She was becoming more excited, and something she was already really skilled at. So it was nice to just remind the teacher of their own leadership. And we would then look at the data. And before I would even put the next meeting on the calendar, she would come and find me and say, did you see this? Did you see what this student did? And when we think about data and storytelling, you can't see it, but you can kind of see, we have a student who like didn't test, and then showed up one day and then started testing, and their scores have boosted. And so when I'm looking at that data, I'm like, okay, what is the story here? We're chronically absent. How are we as a school supporting this chronically absent student? And now that you're here, what supports do you need that you're here? And now that you're here, you're coming in at approaching benchmark. And again, we're going to celebrate that. So one thing that I'm wondering is, how do we support staff in more confidently and frequently engaging students in their data? So as I mentioned in the SIP briefly, that this teacher also went in and did a data workshop with their students and began to engage students every time they progress monitored with their data to get students understanding and excited about what was happening. So one way to start moving towards that is to design some PD improvement cycles to include strategies for sharing data. So what does it really look like to have every member of staff doing this from the very beginning of the year? Okay, so building the capacity to teach. So this by far was one of my biggest mental blocks throughout my PRN journey, because I would consistently make this CLP with, well, I'm not a teacher, so I don't know how to do this, or I wasn't in the classroom for very long, so how can I go in and tell somebody else like about their teaching? And my mentor would very kindly always meet me with grace and say, Chikara, the teachers are the expert in their content area. We are not necessarily here to teach them how to use their content. What we are here to do, and what you do know how to do, is go into a classroom. What's right? What's not looking right? How are you taking data? How are they delivering their instructions? What questions are they asking? And how, yeah, you're right, I do know how to do that. I know how to do that. So we really broke down building capacity to teach in our school setting into these various areas. Academic differentiation, social emotional differentiation, which would eventually lead us to a more natural sense of belonging. What I would like to highlight here is that building the capacity to teach also involves a consistency in coaching. It involved transparency and visibility. So I had to learn, like, I do have so much that I need to do. This checklist is forever growing. However, I do need to get out and be in the community. I just want to walk through classrooms. Like, it is so important for students and for staff to see their leaders in the building. Making those data-driven decisions, sharing the leadership, and celebrating those promising practices. The evidence that I have linked here is a learning walk tool that we use that aligned directly to our strategic plan, which partly focus on staff, school accountability. And so that's what this tool does highlight. Looking for evidence in the classroom, jotting it down, and then when we were leaving the classroom, briefly coming together to debrief. So a couple questions here, recognizing that this was like such a thing for me all year. How do I continue to build my capacity and confidence in teaching and learning? What actions need to be taken to build a culture of continuous, non-evaluative feedback without judgment? One way to start moving towards these questions is to collaborate with staff to develop meaningful learning tools aligned to strategic plans. And that's applicable to whether I remain at the grade school and we look at our strategic plan for next year, or whether I am elsewhere, making sure that what we are doing is aligned to our school goals. Building the capacity to collaborate. Again, I started to, the more that I embraced and trusted the process in PRN, started to see some themes amongst the core leadership practices, and facilitation is definitely one of those themes, as well as giving and receiving feedback. And one that I really started to uplift is creating opportunities for educators. One way I did this was through using various protocols, and I chose to uplift protocols, although there is a wealth of evidence for this core leadership practice. But I was definitely one of those individuals. I was like, another protocol. These are so restricting. This PRN loves protocols. My mentor, my principal loved protocols because they went through PRN. And then finally, I again hit that moment, and through lots of reflection was like, wait a minute. They might actually be onto something, and that the purpose for these is really being able to, again, hold space, and through strategic, strong facilitation, you are able to uplift all voices and all perspectives. You're able to, through strong facilitation, okay, step down, who can we step up, how are we pulling people in, how are we holding the space, because that silence sometimes is really important. One way that I did this was staff morale being really low at various points this year. And sometimes in education, unfortunately, there becomes this like us versus them mentality with administration and teachers, and we definitely hit that spot. So I did strategically ask administration to not join our restorative circle, and I used the connections protocol. And this is a protocol. At first I was like, this makes no sense because you're not even talking to each other. But what it did do was it allowed everybody to speak once before anybody else spoke. It did hold that space really beautifully for reflection. And what I learned in retrospect, only a couple weeks ago when I really started thinking about my evidence, was that the connections were actually made outside of the protocol. This protocol provided the space for the thoughts to continue to go, but what it did was it allowed staff to connect outside of this space to continue these conversations, not only with one another, but to enter a breathing space and continue conversations with administration. Because I was transparent with administration's not here right now, but it is important that they are part of this circle at some point. So as we move forward, as I said earlier, creating opportunities is really important. So what ways can we create consistent opportunities to support building a culture of feedback? Feedback is another one of those themes across all of the core leadership practices. And what I would like to do to start moving towards that is to dive into our internal staff survey and our survey works data. Again, when we're looking at data, there is a story there. So we do need to hear how teachers are feeling, and it's important to look at the data because they could be saying two different things. building the capacity to lead. For me was really about, again, these opportunities and like, how are they authentic and how are they reliable and prepared and organized and uplifting people? I'm at the 5-minute mark, so I'm gonna start to like push through. One way I did this was through peer groups. So as I said, our seniors this year, they were done with us. They gave us a 2 out of 10. They were like unhappy. It really didn't even matter what we did. They were just like 2 thumbs down all the time. But we did want to value, and we do value what they were feeling and how they felt. So we created these peer group plans. At the same time, I worked closely with our restorative specialist, who was also is naturally very good at what they do and was also seeking further leadership and opportunity within their role. And this was a perfect place to do it based on the relationships that they have built with students. So they stepped into this, they ran these peer groups, they took notes, and then they came back and they provided the team with like, this is what the kids are saying, this is what they want. And we were able to meet some of those needs for the seniors, get them on campus for college visits, have an earlier spirit week and things like that. They still weren't happy, but it's okay. So some next questions. What are the implications of missed opportunities for staff leadership? Really thinking about how would the restorative specialists have felt if we didn't provide this opportunity? Would they have felt heard or seen? And I'd like to meet with the ILT team to again review teacher feedback and really identify some of those opportunities so we're moving into things with a plan. All right, reorganizing systems. Some of my greatest growth this year, and I really have grown to love this core leadership practice. So initially I was like, this is all about laws and compliance and like fiscal resources and strategic planning. And I was like, I had nothing to do with any of that. However, I actually do, because this core leadership practice is also about closing inequities. And that is what I am consistently doing through school events and through attendance procedures and following truancy and things like creating a hall pass policy. The evidence for this piece initially came because we really just had some safety concerns. We're a 74-acre campus, kids were kind of everywhere. We had to kind of reel things in a little bit. Well, what I do quickly want to highlight with this one is that I created the policy, we collected some data, presented it to teachers, opened up the policy for their feedback, recognizing that this is going to impact them the most. This is going to play out in their classrooms. So with that being said, where are we returning our power to teachers? How are we making them feel good? Because when we share power as leaders, we are actually gaining power. When I share this policy and put it back on them, I'm creating and giving them ownership over this. And through that ownership, we are actually better able to leverage accountability. So questions, I want to continue to figure out where can we find ways to return power to our teachers to build a more inclusive community. And again, wanting to go in with a plan. So identifying what practices, policies have the most impact on our teachers to start pulling them in. All right, so some next steps in my leadership. Transparently, I'm not really sure where I'm going. I'm spending a lot of time on school spring. So there may be something out there. And I also know that I very much still have a home at the Green School. So here are some thoughts that quickly came to me. This box on your left were things that I was like, okay, these naturally came to me. I want to continue to develop and define my authentic self, to have seen me and known me at the start of the year and to see me and to know me now. There is a vast difference in my confidence. I don't know, I kind of was like taking other people's leadership and like morphing myself into what I thought I needed to be, because I was like, I'm too loud and I talk with my hands and I look like this. And now I'm like, no, this is me and like this works and I'm still articulate in who I am. I want to identify coaching and mentoring opportunities for myself, especially if I do move into a leadership role at another school. I want to continue to dive into reorganizing systems, because when we are really diving into that one, what you will find is that you are really kicking yourself back up to the first core leadership practice. In order to dive into this system, I have to set some direction and move through it, find the right language to continue to build accountability. And the box on the right came to me just through further reflection, primarily with my mentor on this year. So when we communicate something's a priority, really leading like it's a priority, ensuring that we're closing the loop, or if something doesn't work out, acknowledging the end of it and continuing to seek police feedback. I'm sure I'm right at my time, Chris, so I'm just gonna end with this. So, I intentionally and transparently chose to use the same focus question from my mid-year. And the reason that I chose to do that is because this question and the points here are still at the forefront of my leadership, and I don't think that that will ever change. This will always be about teaching and learning, and at the same time, it is going to continue to be about students every single day without any exceptions. And these things have to come with accountability, and because we're human, there also has to be a level of grace.
All right, let's. Okay, good. Good. Go ahead. All right, I'm just going to, let me stop the recording for a minute. No. Watch this.